Today we have Marc Antoine Caya, founder and CEO of Gopier, Canada's first peer-to-peer lending platform focused on individuals, not businesses. Marc, thanks for joining us on Canadian Tech Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Derek.
Terrific. Let's get started here. What was your inspiration for founding Gopier?
Well, initially I was working at a bank. I was working in investment banking, and as part of my job at the bank, we were issuing some fixed income securities for a client. More particularly, in this particular case, it was convertible debentures. And I thought that was an interesting investment vehicle for me personally. It offered a high yield fixed income with a convertible feature that just fit my overall risk profile and what I was looking for in my own personal investment portfolio. So when I looked at other opportunities in the market, I quickly realized that it's very difficult for a retail investor, so like everyday Canadian investor, to access any fixed income product or basically any asset class aside from stocks and perhaps crypto. And I wanted to change that. And one of the very first things that you learn in Finance 101, is the importance of building a diversified portfolio, having multiple asset classes, and fixed income is always one of the first asset class that you learn about. And I thought it was quite surprising that it's not accessible. Bonds, debentures, it does not trade on an exchange. So unless you have access to a well-connected broker or that you're wealthy enough to have your own desk, your own fixed income trading desk, chances are that you cannot access fixed income products. And I thought that was a problem that I wanted to solve. And that's what initially led to the idea of GoPeer.
Terrific. Yeah. So there are similar platforms for small businesses. I've seen them. I've checked them out before, but this is specifically targeted at individuals. What was there specifically a need around individuals accessing a peer-to-peer lending platform that you identified as well, or was that simply like the niche that you thought needed to be filled?
A little bit of both. So as I mentioned, the initial inspiration came more from the investor side as I was looking for high-yielding fixed income products. So I studied the market. There's various things out there. There's real estate, there's small businesses, there's large businesses, there's also consumer loans. And I quickly realized that there's a huge gap in the Canadian market for consumer loans between what banks are offering and what non-bank lenders are offering. And in terms of interest rate differential, I realized that non-bank lenders were offering loans at rates that are easily 2 times, 3 times, 4 times what you would get at a bank, and there's not much in between. So I thought clearly that there was a great opportunity there, and while I studied a little bit more of the market, do a deeper dive in the opportunity, I realized there are millions of Canadians that are credit worthy but fall through the cracks of our current banking system and are left with very high cost credit alternatives. So I thought there was an opportunity that fit well with my original idea of offering high yielding fixed income solutions to Canadians. And both problems sort of solve each other. Where on one hand, we're able to offer loans at attractive rates for the near prime segment, which is the category of sort of credit profile that we've decided to serve, while offering attractive returns to investors as well.
Terrific. That makes sense. So firms like GoPeer have been operating in the USA for a little while now, and this type of platform has been available to small businesses in Canada, as I mentioned. Before GoPeer, what was the major hurdle to launching a Canadian peer-to-peer platform that was approved for lending between individuals, and how did GoPeer overcome these hurdles? Because, like we said, you were first.
So I think one of the major hurdles there's 2 major hurdles. One is on the legal side and one is on the technology side. On the legal front, there's not really a structure that's in place that's sort of easily accessible for entrepreneurs to build and launch a company. This is a very highly regulated industry, both on the lending side and on the investment side of the business, with provincial jurisdictions, with different regulators. So it's a highly complex legal environment. And so we've decided to we've sort of built our own platform by tailoring bits and pieces within the current regulatory framework to operate in a manner that is compliant with securities regulations.
Okay.
But that process took about 18 months to figure out, and lots of meetings with lawyers as well. Unfortunately, I'm very familiar with securities laws now, but that's definitely a very complex and difficult barrier, I believe, for entrepreneurs to build a company in the field of dealing securities and online lending. The lending side is a little bit easier to tackle. The other side is on the technology side. So we've spent quite a decent amount of time to find a platform off the shelf that we could use. There's lots of providers out there for peer-to-peer lending platform from Europe, from the United States, from Asia. And we've evaluated about a dozen different suppliers, a dozen different platforms, but none of them had what was required for us to comply with regulations. So at the end of the day, we decided to build the platform from scratch, and that was also a pretty massive undertaking.
Yeah, I can imagine so. That's interesting. I mean, you would think at some point you'd come across something, especially from a European provider who, with a little bit of tweaking, would have been able to accommodate Canadian and maybe provincially specific regulations. But obviously, either you didn't come across a vendor who was willing to do that, or the platform didn't allow you to customize it to an extent that would have made sense. Was that basically what it came down to?
That's correct. What we've realized is that most of those platforms were initially built for a more traditional lending model, and then they were tweaked to allow for a more peer-to-peer, two-sided marketplace. There were some options that we could have used with doing some tweakings, but they were more priced for enterprise grade solutions where it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to get started, and that was not an option for us.
Right. Makes sense. So, we're literally talking about people's money here. So when people are lending people are borrowing, what types of security mechanisms has GoPeer put into place to help prevent things like Sybil attacks, accounts being drained, other kinds of fraud that, of course, I'm sure, concerned about and your investors are concerned about, and that sort of thing?
Yes, well, I may not be the appropriate person to speak to the details of that. My co-founder and CTO, Joseph, has a long background in data security. He previously worked in the payment industry and compliance. We obviously take data security very seriously, and we have multiple layers of authorization. The data is fully encrypted in transit and at rest. Even myself, for example, as a CEO, I do have access to our database, but I don't have access to the SIN. I don't have access to the bank account numbers, and those are encrypted, and there's no way for me to decrypt them. I cannot speak exactly to the details of how it's done, mostly because I don't know.
That's okay.
But we definitely take this very seriously.
That's good to hear. Maybe we can have your co-founder on for a follow-up later on. So what are the major benefits customers get from using GoPeer instead of a traditional loan or using a credit card? You talked a little bit about this earlier in terms of some people, maybe even like me, falling through the cracks with traditional banking, having to resort to, I guess, what we might call shadow banking or, non-traditional lenders and paying 30 or 40% for a loan. Are there any other benefits from using GoPeer instead of maybe even using GoPeer instead of a bank, even though you apply or you qualify for a loan through a bank?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're looking for a loan, what we're seeing, there's a few use case that we're seeing. Some people do qualify for a loan at the bank, but they prefer to come to GoPeer mostly for the convenience and the speed. So you apply online. It takes a minute or two. You get your identity verified online. It's a very seamless process. You connect to your bank your bank account online. The entire process takes a few minutes at most, and then our underwriting model will score the loan, and we'll have someone on our credit team to do a final review before approving the loan. But the entire process can be done very quickly, and you could do it from in a pajamas in your sofa if you want to.
Yeah.
So that's what we've heard mostly from people who have very high credit scores. That could definitely just go to their bank and possibly have either comparable rates for unsecured term loans, or sometimes if they have access to home equity line of credit, then our rates usually are a little bit higher than what they could have access to.
Cool. Yeah, that
But
makes sense.
the majority of the market that we serve and our core focus is debt consolidation, and this is the market that we want to own. That's what we've noticed, that about 70% of the borrowers that come onto our platform, they currently have a loan with some of our competitors, usually will be non-bank lenders, or they carry credit card loans, a balance on their credit card month over month, and they come onto our platform to consolidate their loans at a better rate.
Yeah. So I think we were talking before we started recording here. You know, a lot of the loans end up, or you might have even said this earlier, the loans end up being between like 11, 15%. Obviously, that's better than the vast majority, if not all, credit cards, unless you have a stellar credit rating, and you know you've actually called your your credit card issuer to be like, I might just cancel it, or you know, give me a better rate, and they've worked with you a little bit. I think the best I've ever seen, you know, for black card, you make a couple $1,000,000 a year, is like 7 or 8%, which is a good interest rate for a credit card, but it's still a sizable amount of interest if you have a large balance. So certainly, you know, anywhere between 11 and 15%, maybe even up to 17, again, depending on the individual, is still an improvement potentially on their 19, 22, 25% interest rate on their credit card. So that makes a lot of sense. Did you consider building the platform, integrating any sort of blockchain technology of any kind? If so, what did that due diligence and decision process look like? And actually, yeah, we'll start there, and then I'll follow up after.
I know you're a pro when it comes to blockchain and
I wouldn't say I'm a pro. I'm not a
cryptocurrencies.
developer. I'm a power user, not a developer though. So I know more than enough to be dangerous, but enough to know where my knowledge ends, and I need to defer to somebody else.
So we did some initial analysis on that quite a while ago, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we were just getting started. We looked at Bitcoin mostly for their distributed ledger technology and the architecture that would support the platform. There's a lot of advantages like the immutability
Mm-hmm.
and other sort of characteristics of the distributed ledger technology. But in the end, we decided that it was not necessary for our platform, for the model that, and we decided to build the technology from scratch instead, using a microservices architecture.
Okay.
Maybe in the future we'll want to implement some sort of blockchain technology, but for now we decided that it was not a necessary addition to the platform.
Sure. A little bit more on that. Do you think there's room to build on top of a low-fee, fast blockchain? I'm thinking of something like Solana. Near is pretty good too. In the future, so that the data that's collected, like I could take my data somewhere else, really, really easily, kind of like in an open banking type style, or potentially, make it easier for GoPeer to offer additional services as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things that were important for us when we designed the platform was to build a solution and an architecture that was robust and that could easily evolve with the different technologies. So although that's not something that we're considering today, we've built the platform in a microservices architecture way that it's a lot of very, very small independent component that talks to each other,
Mm-hmm.
or we can easily replace one component with a new technology, and the entire platform keeps functioning In short, that's not something we're considering right now, but it could be possible in the future, certainly.
Cool. Fair enough. How do you feel about open banking initiatives in general? They've really taken off in Europe. We seem to be starting to get our heads together at the governmental and very large institutional level here in Canada. Would they help a business like GoPeer, and how?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So our underwriting technology relies on the part of the technology that we have relies on your own banking data. So we look at your transaction history when you apply for a loan, for example. That's how we're able to see your income. So we verify the income automatically without having you upload any further documents, for example. And that can be done in real time. Having open banking will make those solutions a lot more straightforward and give more granularity on what you as an individual want to share with a company like GoPeer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the ownership of the data would shift from the incumbents and larger financial institution that currently have this data to the individual like you, for example. You would own your own financial data, and you'll be able to share the parts that you want with the parties that you want, giving you a lot more control over what you want to what you're comfortable sharing, and then giving companies like GoPeer more more granularity. We don't want to see everything. We don't need to see everything. There's just bits and pieces that we need. And I think having a dedicated framework for open banking will offer that granularity to protect individuals better and give them more control over their own data.
Yeah, I think I went through the application process myself because I wanted to see what it was like, and it looks like you're probably using Equifax or TransUnion, or maybe an intermediary in there to verify address and name and that sort of thing, against credit reports. And then probably Plaid or Flinks for the actual data or banking data. Is that right?
That's right.
Cool. So, yeah, I guess exactly what you're saying, where maybe you don't take necessarily the intermediary out of it, but I'm familiar enough with Plaid's platform and how it works to know that you, as the integrator, don't get a lot of choice in terms of what you ask for. Maybe things have changed in the last time I saw it, but you don't get a ton of choice in terms of what you ask for and what you get, and ultimately you're tailoring your platform to look for specific fields, assuming it's like an XML file type of thing. And then, hopefully you're throwing away the rest, or you're ignoring the rest because you've gotten what you needed. Open banking, like you said, could make it a lot more granular so that the request would still come up. I probably still need to provide my username and my password for my bank in this case. But potentially I'd get an extra field of, says something like Gopier is requesting the last 90 days of transactions, credit card limit or something like that, not necessarily usage, and maybe a couple other things. And it would be actually a lot more clear to me what you're asking for. And of course, you'd only get the data. Gopier would only get the data that they're asking for, as opposed to all this extra cruft that you ultimately don't need or want. More
That's
or less
right.
where we're headed.
I think so. And there's also room for oversight and regulation and just better quality, I think, access to data overall for parties like GoPeer, for example, and more control and oversight and ownership for individuals that are sharing this data as well.
Right. Cool. How satisfied are you with how far Gopir has come? The company's still relatively young, a couple of years old from inception to now, by the sounds of it. Are you happy with your results and your growth so far?
Yes, definitely. So we actually launched the company to the public on September 1st, 2020. So it's not even been a year now. We're still
Yeah.
fairly young and growing on a monthly basis. So that's exciting. But you're right. It took some time. It took almost 2 years to build the technology, obtain all the regulatory licenses to operate that business model across the country.
Terrific. And what's next for you? You said that, right now you're really focused on debt consolidation type loans. what do you think, maybe, if you want to share, or if you're willing to share, what the next target growth area might be, or maybe the next product that you want to launch?
Yeah, so our core focus is debt consolidation, and that's a market we really want to own, and we'll be focused on that market for some time until we can serve it much better. And we want to build technology to eventually, we'd like to get rid of the traditional credit score. Currently, what we're trying to build is identifying those that fall through the cracks on the traditional framework, trying to find those who are credit worthy, but then banks won't necessarily perceive them as credit worthy, for example, or the credit score would not be, would not truly reflect their situation, where we can sort of build technology to appropriately identify your risk profile and appropriately assess an interest rate that will reward the investors that took a risk in investing into your loan. So appropriately rewarding them for the risk that they're taking, but while offering a fair rate for the borrowers. That's one of our core focus. And then other products that will develop in the future. We have a lot of ideas. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of opportunities. But right now we're focusing on the debt consolidation side.
Cool, that makes sense. I actually didn't even touch on this. I have not signed up as an investor yet. I'm going to, because I think this is terrific. Was there anything novel on the investor side of things that you had to do in order to get to this place? We talked a little bit about the borrower. You've got integrations happening in the background to try to make the application process only take a few minutes, which it does, at least in my experience. What about the investor side of things? What does that look like in terms of the application process and the tech you needed to build or integrate in order to make that process hopefully as simple as possible?
Yeah, so it was very important for us to have a solution that's automated, mostly automated or fully automated, online, seamless, integrated, and we've spent a lot of time and resources to develop an onboarding process for investors. Again, this is a heavily regulated space, and we have a lot of obligations and sort of burdens as a exempt market dealer and financial institution where, for example, anti-money laundering, anti-terrorist financing, that may seem trivial or very basic, but for a small company to make sure that the funds that you transfer on GoPeer does not come from the proceeds of money laundering.
Mm-hmm.
That's our data. We have day-to-day obligations and reporting to do on that front. So definitely there was a big part of the technology that we had to build was to automate that component. And another big part is the concept of suitability. So we're essentially selling investments through our platform. And one of the key differentiators that we have is that those investments are available to everyone, or at least every people living in Canada in the age of majority. Sorry, you do not need to be an accredited investor to invest through GoPeer. And for those that are not accredited investors, which is the vast majority of us, well,
Myself
maybe not you,
included.
Derek.
No,
Oh, yeah?
no, oh man. Maybe one day I'll be a millionaire. I'm not there yet.
Yes, so there's a concept of suitability where we need to make sure as a dealer, as an exempt market dealer, we need to make sure that the investments that you're purchasing, the notes that you're investing in are a suitable investment for you,
Mhm.
and that the risk that you're taking in investing in those notes matches your overall risk profile, matches your overall investment strategy, depending on your knowledge as well. So there's a lot of sort of checks and balances and a fairly complex algorithm that underpins the suitability assessment. That was one of the core component that I didn't mention earlier, but that we needed to build in order to obtain the regulatory licenses to be registered as an exempt market dealer.
Cool. I used Kiva a few times in the past. I might have some credit there right now that I need to lend out, but that process was, for better or worse, really manual. I needed to, I had the choice, which was kind of nice. I had the choice of lending out the $25 or $50 or what have you at the time to a woman from Ghana or a family from Colombia or something like that. and target my investment, my loan that way. Is it similar for GoPeer, or are you automating this based on that person's risk tolerance? So if I'm, let's just use random numbers here. If I'm a 7 out of 10 on my risk tolerance level, right? So I'm willing to take more risk than other people, but I don't. If we were calling this stocks or like an ETF, I don't want to be 100% in stocks, right? I want some bonds and stuff like that mixed in. So in terms of that sort of risk level, if I'm a 7 out of 10, are you just doling out that money to whomever needs it and keeping the risk tolerance within that level, or am I actually like scanning through the platform and being like, oh, that person's got a great business plan, or that person really needs some help, and I'm lending out $1,000 to that person specifically.
So both options are available,
Okay.
and it really depends on the investor. Some they come into the platform every day, sometimes multiple times a day, and they look at the new loans that are available. They sort of manually, I know some of them, they can download sort of the data in Excel and do some analysis. They have their own thesis, and they really have a sort of hands-on approach to investing through GoPeer.
Hmm.
And we also have a feature that's called Auto Invest, where you can set your risk boundaries. So sorry, we grade every loan from A plus through to E, depending on the risk profile that it represents. So you can select what risk grade that you're comfortable with, and then the auto invest tool will automatically invest a certain amount per loan that you can set, and it will automatically diversify it as well. So one of the most important things when investing through GoPeer is to build a diversified portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So it will automatically diversify across various regions. For example, you don't want to be over concentrated in the South Ontario automotive market, or you don't want to be over concentrated in the, I don't know, Northern Alberta market with oil and gas, for example. So
Yeah.
it will automatically diversify your portfolio across geographies, across industry of employment, across risk grades. So that usually is the approach that we recommend for most investors, but both options are available.
Yeah. I really want like a Ronco chicken rotisserie. Set it, forget it. I'll come back in a few months and see, $1,000 has grown to 1050 or 1100. Perfect. I'm earning money. That's all they care about. Good stuff. We've touched a little bit on this already, but I want to delve into a little bit more specifically. As a Canadian company, what benefits have you had being Canadian, operating in Canada?
Well, we have a very strong regulatory framework. I may have complained about it a little bit at the beginning, but I think investors are protected, and most users are protected as individuals, and that is a necessity for a business model. When you lend money, you need to know that the person will pay back, or that at least you have a legal framework that governs how the loan is paid back, or if they don't, what are the recourses that we have and how collections work, for example. And definitely that system is very advanced here in Canada. And similarly, on the investor side, I think it's important. Trust and legitimacy and trust are very, very important in our business. And the fact that we have very strong regulatory bodies that oversees the financial industry in Canada adds a little bit of trust and confidence from the public into financial services. So definitely those are some of the stronger points of operating in Canada.
Terrific. On the flip side, what kinds of things are holding GoPeer back from maybe growing more quickly, launching more products, that sort of thing?
I think the same.
Same
My answer would
exact
be the
same
same.
question. Or
Yeah.
yeah,
So
same answer.
yeah, as the regulations is good to promote trust in the sector, it's also very difficult, for example, for us to launch internationally because of those money laundering laws, anti-terrorist financing laws, know your customer, know your client regulations. It's very, very difficult to have our products like broadly available across the world for anyone who would like to invest in a loan through GoPeer, for example. International expansion is part of our roadmap in the future, but there will definitely be some challenges with respect to that.
Is it possible for you to offer the even on just on the investor side, like offer non-Canadian investors the opportunity to lend to Canadian residents?
We're not offering this right now,
No.
mostly because if you're not residing in Canada, let's say you're residing in the United States, then we need to comply with United States securities law. And
Mm-hmm.
we've decided to just focus on the Canadian market for now. And later in a few years, we may expand internationally.
That makes sense. Okay, cool. I want to touch on one more thing. Before the end time started about a year ago. That's what it feels like sometimes. But before the pandemic and all that hit, was GoPeer based in an office? Like, were you going to an office every day, or were you already a remote only, or even just a remote first team?
A little bit of both. So we had an office. We were office based, but we were a parent. We've always been a parent friendly company, or we've tried to be. And I mean, I don't have kids myself, but my co-founder has 3 kids, so it was always important to us to be flexible in that front. So we had an office. We where people came into the office most of the days, and that was great. Personally, I liked it. I think most of us liked the flexibility of being able to go to the office and the flexibility of working from home when you want to work from
Mm-hmm.
home. Now we don't have an office anymore. Like many other companies, we've been working remotely. I think the transition was pretty smooth for us. We've implemented some remote activities like social gatherings and played some games of Among Us and other, trying to do some remote activities to promote team building and having discussions that is not just about work. But it's been working well so far. I'm really excited for when this pandemic is going to be over. I'm not sure if we'll go back to the office right away, but I think most of us would like the social interaction. That's for sure.
At worst, well, actually, has the lease been terminated, or are you actually still paying for an office that you're literally just not using now?
It's been terminated. We
Okay.
or it's been downsized significantly at least.
Okay, so at least you're saving a little bit of money that way, and I guess you can put most of that into those other activities you were talking about to keep the team bonding and getting to know each other when you need to. That's cool. So I guess beforehand you already had most of that, most if any technology you needed in order to make this currently remote only environment possible, whether whether everything's hosted in the cloud, quote unquote, or maybe you had a VPN device of some kind set up at the office or something like that. Was there any sort of besides the people having to move home, was there any other technology related stuff you had to change or modify or move in order to make that process easier?
Not really. We've always been cloud-based from the get-go. We've operated with VPNs for access to special features of the platform from the beginning, and we've been using sort of Microsoft Teams and other other tools. I think from the very beginning, actually before we had an office, we were working remotely as as a
Right. Yeah.
startup that is bootstrapped at the time. So perhaps that was one of the in our very beginning, when this was just an idea and a project that we were working on, we didn't have an office. So I think that's forced us to use those types of tools, and then the shift to a remote work environment was pretty seamless.
Fair enough. Cool. All right. I think we'll end off with this question. What's missing, maybe in your industry or in Canadian technology in general? What's missing that you wish somebody would build?
That's interesting. I think, well, open data. I think open banking is one that's very important, but I would like to see that extended to like credit files and having credit file data as well, with a
Mm-hmm.
lot more granularity, and I think that would be great. Right now, we're relying most on the credit file on the banking data. If both of them were to be included in a sort of regulated framework where individuals have the ownership of those data, and it's more centralized, I think that could be really good.
Fair enough. Cool. Thanks so much for your time. This was a really good to learn more about GoPeer and how it works and some of those hurdles you have to overcome. And hopefully everybody listening or watching really enjoyed it too. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you for having me, Derek. It was a pleasure.
No problem, Mark. Thank you for listening to Canadian Tech Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a 5-star rating on iTunes or your favorite podcast app, or like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. In the meantime, have fun.